Welcome back, students. This week, I'm going to show you how to make this project, the Cross Contour Tube Project. Now, we're going to go over it step by step together. The first thing you need is a large sheet of paper. You can use your notebook paper if you have it. If you are using a sketchbook, turn it sideways, or what we like to call landscape. Make sure you have a pencil, make sure it's sharp, and that you draw as light as you can. This week we are just going to do the base of this project, and then next week we will talk about coloring. Okay, if you remember from last week, when we were drawing our tubes, we want our lines to be kind of wavy, but not too wavy. We're going to start at the top of the paper, and with our pencil come down nice and smooth and make a wavy line. Now, to turn this into a tube, you have to make another line. So starting up top again, the top of this tube I'm going to make a little bit smaller. So I'm going to take my pencil, nice smooth wavy line. Try to end the bottom bigger or wider than you have the top. Okay, now just by drawing those two lines close to the edge of my paper, I have two tubes already drawn. Now I'm going to continue to draw tubes all across my paper. That's what we're doing for the project. So since the space here is small, my next tube, I'm going to want the space a little bit wider. So I'm going to come over, again with my pencil, draw a line. You want a couple bumps, but you don't want to go too crazy, and end smaller than the top. So you'll see we're kind of doing a pattern here. Tube's going to be small on top, big, and then the next one will be small, and then big, and so on. So we're making a little bit of variety in our tubes and our shapes. Working left to right, you're going to go over here again. This one is going to be smaller on the top, so I'm going to come closer with my pencil, draw my curved lines, come down and end a little bit bigger. Moving over to the next line, starting wider, coming down, take your time, ending a little bit smaller. Next tube, we're starting smaller. Couple wavy lines, coming down, and we're going to end a little bit bigger. Now we still have a lot of space over here, so I'm going to start out a little bit wider, and this tube's actually going to go off the side of the paper, just like that. Okay, so what we have now are just what it looks like squiggly lines. So we need to make these turn into tubes, just like we see here. Okay, so in order to do this, there's a couple things that we need. We need these cross contour lines that curve around our tubes, and in each tube we also need one straight line. And this straight line, as you can see, especially in this design right here, it makes it look like the tube is coming out, switching directions, and going back the other way. So each tube needs one single straight line somewhere on the tube. And I like to put it on the widest or biggest part of the tube. I think it looks more three-dimensional that way. It looks like the tube changes shapes and goes into the opposite direction. And that's what we want. All right, let's take a look at our tubes. Now, if you wanted to add more variety, you could take any tube on this paper and split it up. So I could come from this line here, come down to a point right there. And now I changed that one tube into two. Now you don't have to do this, but it does add some variety and changes it up a little bit. Okay, my next step is going to be to take my ruler. I want to draw all my straight lines first before I draw my cross contours. So again, I'm going to pick the the wider parts of my tubes to draw the straight line. Again, I'm doing this a little bit darker so you can see, but you can do it nice and light. In case you make a mistake, you can erase it. Now, just because the line needs to be straight doesn't mean it has to be completely horizontal. It could be on a diagonal or a slant, like that. Draw a line up here. They're a little bit slanted. Again, try to pick the widest part. Okay, now, next here we have two tubes. Remember, I split this tube up. So we need to draw a straight line in each one of these. So that's the only tube that gets two straight lines because it's technically two tubes. I'm going to draw a straight line right here. And then finally our last one that goes off the paper. Okay. Now, what we have done is we have drawn tubes and we have drawn just our straight lines in each tube. The next step is going to be to draw the cross contours. And if you remember from the hand project and all the other examples, these are the lines that go across the shape to make it look three-dimensional. It's much easier to work left to right and just take your time. Now remember, above the straight line, your cross contours are going to curve downward, like a frown. Okay? And below that straight line, your cross contours are going to curve upward, like a smile. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the next tube. Again, it's up to you how much space you want between these cross contours. Just make sure they're not running into each other. That will ruin the illusion. Another option you have is to go right from your existing cross contour on your other tube and just connect these all the way through. So we're just continuing these cross contour lines. I have to be careful there because I don't want these lines to touch. All right, now since I hit the straight line, I need to curve in the opposite direction. Okay, and make the lines curved enough to give the object shape. Okay, we want it to look round. So make sure your lines aren't too straight. Okay, next tube. Get a nice curve on these lines. Again, curving in the opposite direction below the straight line. Okay, moving on to the next tube. Above the straight line, we curve downward. You don't always have to connect your lines. It's just up to you if you like how that looks or not. And then below the straight line, curving the other direction. Curving down. Don't be afraid to go off the paper and come back on. Below the straight line, making smiley faces or curving upward across the tubes. Okay, moving on. Below this straight line, you got it. Going the opposite way. Okay. Moving on. Get a nice curve with your cross contours. Make it look like the shape is round. Now, for any reason, while you're doing this, if maybe you don't like how one of these cross contours turns out, you could always go back, erase it, and make sure that it looks the way you want. That's one of the benefits of drawing light or sketching. I'm drawing a little bit harder just so you can see my pencil marks. Okay, we're already at the last tube. Curving down. And then curving up. Okay, now you're pretty much done with the base for this project. The next step would be to take a marker or a Sharpie and outline all of these lines. So very carefully with a marker or a Sharpie, you will outline every pencil mark that you have drawn. And then when the thing is completely Sharpied in or outlined, if you have any mistakes, you can go back with an eraser and erase any of the pencil marks. So for this week, alongside with your warm-up drawings, the vocab, and your journal, you need to complete this much of the project. Next week's video, we'll talk about what colors you can use and what colors will enhance this drawing and make it really stand out. Take your time, have fun, and be creative. See you next time.